The day humanity was declared extinct, the galaxy did not tremble with explosions or mourn with solemn silence. It simply moved on. Across millions of inhabited worlds, colossal quantum archives updated in perfect synchronization. Ancient observatories rotated beneath crimson suns. Government data spines pulsed with streams of living history. Captain Elena Ward stood alone on the observation deck of the Odyssey, her reflection drifting across the vast curved window as the endless darkness stretched before her. Beyond the glass, there were no familiar constellations, no bustling trade lanes, no glowing worlds teeming with civilization. Only the cold, silent expanse between galaxies, a place so empty that even light seemed to lose the will to travel. The ship itself carried the scars of survival. Its hull had been patched hundreds of times with mismatched alloys gathered from abandoned wrecks and forgotten stations. Every corridor hummed with machinery older than anyone alive. The engines didn't roar with elegant precision, they groaned with determination, as though refusing to surrender after centuries of impossible voyages. This was no flagship of a mighty empire. It was a monument to endurance. Behind the Odyssey, dozens of ships drifted in disciplined formation through the void. Some had once been cargo freighters. Others were mining platforms, medical stations, research vessels, or military cruisers stripped down and rebuilt countless times. Together they formed humanity's hidden fleet, the last surviving fragment of a civilization the galaxy believed had died 300 years ago. Their cities no longer rested on planets beneath blue skies. Home existed inside rotating habitat rings, recycled air systems, hydroponic forests glowing beneath artificial suns, and classrooms where children learned about oceans they had never touched. Entire generations had lived and died without ever setting foot on Earth. To them, rain was a recorded sound. Wind was simulated through environmental vents. The smell of real soil existed only inside carefully preserved botanical chambers where ancient seeds still clung to life beneath watchful eyes. Elena watched young cadets jogging through the habitat gardens below the observation deck, laughing beneath trees whose DNA had been reconstructed from fragments saved during humanity's evacuation centuries before. Their voices echoed through the steel corridors with a hope that almost hurt to hear. They deserved more than survival. They deserved a future that wasn't confined within reinforced bulkheads and emergency protocols. Every child aboard the fleet carried the burden of history without ever asking for it. They had inherited exile before they had inherited names. 3 centuries earlier, everything had changed in a single impossible week. Humanity had watched as the Sol system disappeared behind a wall of shimmering quantum distortion unlike anything science could explain. Rescue fleets never returned. Long-range sensors failed. Every probe vanished into the expanding anomaly as if reality itself had folded over Earth's final coordinates. The Galactic Dominion investigated briefly before declaring the entire human civilization irretrievably lost. According to galactic law, extinct species could not own territory, participate in diplomacy, or reclaim abandoned worlds. Humanity had been erased not only from the stars, but from the law itself. Yet hidden beyond the galaxy's edge, they refused to become ghosts. Engineers transformed scrap into miracles. Scientists solved problems with tools older than their grandparents. Farmers coaxed harvests from recycled water and artificial sunlight. Musicians composed symphonies that echoed through metal corridors, reminding exhausted workers why survival still mattered. Humanity had not merely endured the centuries. It had evolved into something stronger, bound together not by governments or borders, but by shared memory and relentless hope. A soft chime interrupted Elena's thoughts. Navigation had completed the final calculations. Ahead, the blackness shimmered almost imperceptibly. Beyond that invisible boundary lay the Milky Way, and home. For 300 years, humanity had hidden from a galaxy that believed it no longer existed. Now, for the first time, they were finally going back. The moment the Odyssey crossed the invisible threshold into civilized space, the universe seemed to awaken. Silence shattered beneath a storm of automated warnings. Crimson symbols flooded every display across the bridge, while deep alarm tones echoed through the command deck like the heartbeat of an approaching execution. Long-range scanners, dormant for centuries, suddenly exploded with contacts. 1, 10, 100, then thousands. Artificial intelligences embedded within ancient defense satellites recognized the impossible energy signature before any living being could react. Identification protocols completed in less than a heartbeat. The verdict appeared across every screen with terrifying certainty: biological designation detected, species status conflict. Human genome verified. Official status, extinct. Anomaly level, Omega. Containment authorized, ****. Captain Elena Ward felt the weight of 300 years crash down upon her shoulders. She had prepared for suspicion. She had prepared for disbelief. She had even prepared for fear. But no one had imagined that the galaxy's machines would reject reality itself. According to every official record, humanity no longer existed. Which meant the people standing beside her, the engineers gripping trembling control panels, the navigators whispering silent prayers, the young communications officers who had never known another home, were not viewed as survivors. They were classified as errors. Outside the panoramic viewport, empty space twisted without warning. Brilliant tiers of blue-white light ripped open across the stars as hyperspace corridors unfolded like cracks in reality. Massive warships emerged one after another, each dwarfing the Odyssey until the human flagship resembled a drifting fragment of debris. Their armor gleamed beneath distant starlight with impossible precision. Countless weapon arrays rotated into firing position in perfect synchronization. Carrier vessels released clouds of autonomous interceptors that spread across the void like metallic predators surrounding wounded prey. Within minutes, the entire human convoy was enclosed inside an unbreakable sphere of overwhelming firepower. No shots had been fired. Not yet. That almost made it worse. A transmission burst through every frequency simultaneously, translated instantly into every known language. Unknown vessels. Power down all systems immediately. You are operating under fraudulent biological identification. Human civilization was officially terminated 312 standard years ago. Any entity claiming otherwise is considered an existential security threat. The words were calm. Professional. Completely devoid of hatred. To the Dominion, this wasn't murder. It was maintenance. Elena stepped toward the communications console, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the suffocating pressure filling the bridge. This is Captain Elena Ward of the human exploration vessel Odyssey. We are not machines. We are not imposters. We are the surviving citizens of Earth. We request peaceful diplomatic recognition. Silence answered. For a brief, impossible second, hope flickered across every face on the bridge. Then another transmission arrived. Diplomatic request denied. Biological records cannot contradict the galactic census. Extinct species possess no legal identity. Prepare for containment. The word struck harder than any missile ever could. Humanity had not simply lost its home. It had lost the legal right to exist. Across the fleet, children watched through observation windows as alien warships surrounded them in endless formation. Parents quietly pulled them away from the glass. Engineers abandoned repair stations to report to emergency shelters. Doctors activated trauma bays they prayed would never be needed. There was no panic, only the heavy silence of people realizing that survival alone had not been enough. Beyond the battlefield, emergency broadcasts spread across neighboring systems. Citizens gathered around public holoscreens, staring in disbelief at the impossible images. Some whispered that ghosts had returned. Others insisted the ships were elaborate machines wearing the faces of a dead species. The galactic census had never been wrong in 10,000 years. Surely. It couldn't be wrong now. Yet beyond every weapon aimed at the human fleet, one undeniable truth remained. The living were about to be executed, because history insisted they were already dead. The answer did not come from a superweapon or a desperate last stand. It came from a file that no one was ever meant to see. Deep inside the Odyssey's aging quantum archives, hidden beneath layers of obsolete encryption carried through 3 centuries of exile, Chief Archivist Malik Ran uncovered a fragment of data that should not have survived. It had been recovered long ago from a drifting Dominion courier destroyed near the edge of human space during the first days of the evacuation. At the time, the information had been too heavily corrupted to decipher. Now, with modern reconstruction algorithms built by generations who had survived on solving impossible problems, the final pieces suddenly aligned. As forgotten code unfolded across the holographic display, the bridge fell into stunned silence. What emerged was not a military secret. It was something far more terrifying. It was the operating manual for the galaxy itself. The Extinction Registry had never been a neutral historical archive. It had been engineered as the Dominion's most powerful political weapon. Officially, it existed to preserve accurate records after civilizations vanished through war, plague, or cosmic catastrophe. In reality, it served a far darker purpose. Whenever a species grew too independent, too inventive, or too resistant to Dominion authority, the Council quietly rewrote reality with a bureaucratic decree. 1 vote. 1 digital signature. 1 updated census. Overnight, an entire civilization became legally extinct. Their colonies were confiscated. Their trade routes dissolved. Their alliances invalidated. Any survivors instantly lost the protection of galactic law because, according to every government database, they no longer existed. Empires did not need genocide when paperwork could accomplish the same result. Malik's hands trembled as he continued decoding the files. Hidden behind the registry were names that no history book had ever recorded. Entire civilizations stretched across the holographic chamber, species erased so completely that not even myths remained. Ancient star nations whose architecture had been credited to the Dominion. Scientific breakthroughs falsely attributed to powerful member worlds. Medical discoveries stolen from peoples who had officially never existed. Thousands upon thousands of extinct civilizations filled the archive, each accompanied by classified memoranda detailing political motives rather than natural disasters. Some had refused unfair taxation. Others had rejected military occupation. A few had simply discovered technologies the Council wished to monopolize. Every extinction had been deliberate. Every disappearance had been authorized. Every page carried the cold precision of government procedure. Captain Elena Ward stared at the endless list, unable to speak. Humanity had spent centuries believing they were victims of a tragic misunderstanding. They were not. Their extinction had been convenient. The realization spread through the crew like a shockwave. Anger mixed with disbelief. Mechanics stopped working to watch the evidence scroll across public displays. Teachers shielded children from the worst details while struggling to hide tears of their own. Elder survivors, who still remembered stories passed down from those who had fled Earth's final days, stood frozen as centuries of unanswered questions suddenly found their terrible answer. History had not forgotten humanity. History had been edited. Elena looked toward the communication array that was still linked to every Dominion fleet surrounding them. If they died now, the truth would die with them. She took a slow breath and gave a single command. Transmit everything. The bridge hesitated for only a heartbeat before thousands of encrypted files surged into the quantum relay network. Classified documents, internal council recordings, voting records, confiscation orders, erased census logs, every hidden secret exploded across civilian communication channels faster than military sensors could react. The data spread from world to world like light itself. Government firewalls failed under the impossible volume. News agencies abandoned scheduled broadcasts. Universities verified authentication signatures in real time. Historians watched entire chapters of galactic civilization collapse before their eyes. Within minutes, billions of citizens across the stars were no longer watching an illegal human fleet. They were witnessing the greatest lie ever told by the civilization that claimed to rule the galaxy. The Dominion moved with terrifying speed. Before outrage could become revolution, before truth could outrun censorship, the High Council issued its final command. Every fleet in the sector received the same uncompromising order: erase the anomaly. Silence the transmission. Preserve the law, **** across the void. Thousands of warships surged forward in perfect formation. Their engines ignited like newborn stars, flooding the darkness with rivers of blue-white fire. Heavy rail cannons rotated into alignment. Planet-killer lances awakened from centuries of standby. Swarms of autonomous attack drones poured from carrier bays until the heavens themselves seemed alive with steel. To the Dominion, this was not revenge. It was damage control. If humanity survived another hour, the empire built on carefully edited history might never recover. Aboard the Odyssey, no one celebrated exposing the truth. They prepared for the possibility that they would never live long enough to see its consequences. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in crimson. Families embraced without speaking. Children were escorted into reinforced shelters beneath the habitat rings while teachers quietly promised that everything would be all right, even though they no longer believed the words themselves. Engineers sprinted between aging reactors, squeezing impossible power from machines that had already exceeded their intended lifespans by centuries. Every system aboard every human vessel shifted from survival mode into something far more dangerous. Adaptation. Captain Elena Ward stood before the fleet-wide command channel, her voice calm despite the storm gathering outside the hull. We cannot defeat them by becoming what they expect. Her words echoed through dozens of ships. 300 years taught us something the Dominion never learned. When you have almost nothing, you learn to make the impossible useful. The human fleet scattered. To Dominion admirals, it looked like panic. It wasn't. Mining vessels accelerated toward abandoned jump gates left drifting between forgotten trade routes. Science ships transmitted streams of gravitational calculations faster than enemy prediction algorithms could process them. Civilian cargo haulers deployed thousands of small drones carrying nothing more than reflective hull plating and emergency fusion cores. They were never meant to destroy battleships. They were designed to confuse them. Then the trap awakened. Human engineers overloaded dormant jump gates that had stood silent for millennia, transforming ancient transportation corridors into colossal gravity anchors. Invisible tides of distorted spacetime swept across the battlefield. Dominion formations, built upon flawless geometric precision, suddenly found themselves pulled off course by forces no tactical doctrine had anticipated. Massive cruisers collided with one another. Missile swarms lost targeting solutions as space itself bent unpredictably around them. Autonomous drone fleets identified their own reflections among humanity's decoys and opened fire on friendly formations. Across the battlefield, mathematics became a weapon more devastating than any cannon. Elena watched the impossible unfold through the bridge viewport. Humanity had not built stronger ships. They had built better ideas. As Dominion commanders struggled to regain control, Elena opened one final transmission, not to the enemy fleet, but to every citizen watching across the galaxy. If your laws demand the murder of the living, she said, her voice carrying across billions of receivers, then your laws deserve to die. The word spread faster than any missile ever launched. On occupied worlds, workers shut down factories supplying Dominion fleets. Military officers refused execution orders. Governors resigned rather than enforce fabricated history. Hidden resistance movements that had survived in silence for generations stepped into the open. Species once convinced they stood alone suddenly recognized fragments of their own stolen histories inside humanity's revelations. Across countless systems, the fear that had sustained the Dominion for thousands of years cracked all at once. The battle did not end because humanity destroyed the greatest armada in the galaxy. It ended because the Empire discovered a truth more dangerous than any weapon ever forged. The moment ordinary people stop believing unjust laws are sacred, even the strongest empire begins to fall. The war did not end with a triumphant explosion or the dramatic collapse of a single enemy flagship. It ended in something far quieter, a signature. One by one, representatives from every surviving civilization gathered inside the newly restored Galactic Assembly, a chamber that had once symbolized absolute authority but now carried the heavy silence of collective guilt. The towering hall, carved from luminous crystal that reflected entire star systems across its vaulted ceiling, had witnessed thousands of years of political victories and betrayals. Never before had it witnessed an empire admitting that its own history had been built upon deliberate lies. Delegates who had once defended the Dominion with unwavering certainty now stood beneath the weight of evidence they could no longer deny. The Extinction Registry, the document that had erased countless civilizations with a single bureaucratic command, was projected above the assembly floor for the final time. Then, with one unanimous vote, every line of fraudulent history dissolved into light. Millions of names returned to existence. Entire civilizations, once buried beneath fabricated records, were acknowledged again. Across the galaxy, people watched as history itself was rewritten, not to create a new myth, but to restore the truth. When the final amendment to the Galactic Charter appeared, the chamber remained silent long enough for every word to settle into memory. No civilization shall ever be declared forgotten while even one living soul endures. It was more than a law. It was a promise born from centuries of injustice. The sentence spread instantly through every communication network, translated into thousands of languages, engraved onto orbital monuments, government archives, and navigation databases. For the first time in 300 years, star maps reopened a section that had remained blank. The Sol system returned to every chart. Beside it appeared a name the galaxy had once erased with frightening ease. Humanity, not listed as extinct. Not marked as an anomaly. Simply, alive. Outside the assembly, celebration swept across worlds that had spent generations living beneath fear. Cities illuminated skylines with rivers of light stretching toward the stars. Ships of every design gathered in peaceful formations where battle fleets had once prepared for war. Children from dozens of species visited museums that were no longer filled with stolen histories but with honest ones. Human scientists walked openly beside scholars whose civilizations had also been erased, comparing languages, rebuilding cultures, and restoring forgotten discoveries to their rightful creators. The galaxy was not suddenly perfect. Wounds that deep would require generations to heal. But for the first time in thousands of years, those wounds could finally be acknowledged instead of hidden. Captain Elena Ward never sought monuments. Weeks after the assembly, she quietly returned to the observation deck aboard the Odyssey, the same scarred vessel that had carried humanity through 3 centuries of exile. Beyond the viewport, Earth glowed in the distance beneath the warm light of a restored Sunday. Reconstruction drones shimmered around the planet like tiny fireflies, repairing orbital infrastructure abandoned for centuries. Blue oceans reflected golden clouds exactly as the oldest photographs had promised. Elena rested one hand against the cool glass, remembering the stories her grandparents had told, stories passed from survivors who had escaped a home they believed they would never see again. She thought of those who had died believing humanity's name would vanish forever. They would never witness this sunrise. Yet somehow, their courage had carried everyone else here. A young cadet stepped quietly onto the bridge beside her. He had been born aboard the Odyssey and had never felt real gravity beneath open skies. "Captain," he whispered, staring at the living world before them. "Is that home?" Elena smiled, though tears blurred the horizon. "No," she answered softly. "It was." She paused, watching countless ships from every civilization converge peacefully around Earth, no longer as conquerors or rulers, but as neighbors. "Now," she said, her voice filled with quiet certainty, "it's where our future begins. And from that day forward, Whenever historians searched the moment the old galaxy ended and a better one began, they did not point to the greatest battle ever fought. They pointed to the day a species declared extinct refused to disappear, and reminded the universe that existence is never granted by those in power, it is earned by those who keep hope alive until history finally tells the truth.